And let's spend a late October morning and afternoon exploring a 500 plus acre preserve here in New London County, Connecticut. As you can see by this stone wall, that this land was at one point pasture. Probably a little too stony to grow anything that requires tilling the soil here. But much of this land is second growth forest for that reason. And this is called the Tri-Town Preserve. It's where three geographic units meet. Three towns in New London County, Connecticut meet here. And the junction for those towns is just up the hill here. This is about 9 miles of trails back here, and there's a main loop that's a little over 5 miles that I'm going to be following today. And then if you do some of the spurs and loops off of it, you can get quite a few more miles than that. We've got some variable fall color. Some of the trees are past peak, and some are at full color. So we'll have to see how that unfolds today. These beech trees in the foreground here are actually still green. At least a lot of the leaves are still green. And let's follow this stone wall for a minute. There's some interesting boulders up here. And if you've hiked in this area, you know that rocks are common in every park you go to for the most part. So to hike with rocks and boulders is interesting and common. Got a really big triangular shaped boulder up here. The bedrock in this area is somewhat unique for this part of the country. It's called gabbro, G-A-B-R-R-O, which is a rock that bubbles up from deep within the earth. It's an igneous rock, and it is a different color than a lot of the rocks in this part of Connecticut. A lot of the rocks around here either are layered in the form of gneisses and schists, or they're derived from granite type minerals, and they have that pinkish, whitish color. But this is gabbro here, and it's kind of a bluish green. And this boulder is just covered in moss. And even some rock cap fern on the very top there. So let's take a quick peek at the map of this Tri-Town Preserve, and then we'll keep moving. And as this trail map indicates in dark green, this is a large purchase area with several places to park on the south end of this preserve. It's called Miller Road in North Stonington. There's several places on the northeast corner of this preserve where it's roadside parking only. But the symbol in blue there for parking does have a small parking lot, room for about 10 cars. And the blue trail circumnavigates the entire preserve here and goes up over what's called Lambert Mountain, northwest of the start point, and Rickstown Mountain to the northeast of the starting point. I am starting at this parking lot at 89 Miller Road is what the address says, so you can put that in your GPS. It should get you here. And I've come about a half mile onto the blue dashed loop. I just talked to one of the stewards of this preserve, and he says the blue trail is an interesting trail, but where they've done this blue and white dashing, it's designed to even show more of the interesting features along the blue loop. So you can go in and out of the blue loop and see even more interesting features as you hike. It's a perfect day for hiking. It's in the low 50s. It's just cloudy enough. I'm not going to get shadow issues that make it difficult to get good videos or photos, but not cloudy enough to make it real dismal and gray. So let's enjoy this hike. We got about 5 or 6 hours of good daylight left. Well, I can say of the common hardwood trees found in the area I'm covering by this channel, which is a large geographic area, the beech tree is probably the easiest to identify. And it certainly is today, because if you look around here, a lot of the soft maple or red maple and the sugar maple and the birches that are common in this area have lost their leaves, and it's looking more like November. And as you pan around here, all of a sudden, what's all this green? Small trees, large trees, everything's green. Well, what we have back here is a fairly large American beech and root sprouts galore coming up around it. Let's zoom into the top of this guy for a minute here. And on this side, especially on this one side of the main trunk there are a lot of sprouts coming up, and most of these are probably from the root system of the parent tree. Certainly beeches can reproduce from the edible seeds that they drop in the fall, but when you have this many young'uns around the parent tree, usually it's because of vegetative reproduction, which is basically plants coming up from the parent plant from the roots or from the lower part of the trunk. A lot of time that happens with trees that have died or are dying. In this case, it seems to be pretty common in this woods throughout the park that I've seen so far, and we're not too far along, but I've seen quite a bit of it the first mile of this hike. So beech trees are easy to tell when they're still green and everything else is turned. And also in the middle of the winter and even early spring, a lot of times these little sprouts keep their leaves. The leaves will turn a tan color, but they will not drop off these lower branches or smaller sprouts until April or May sometimes. It's called marcescent leaves. And I've got a little clip on beech trees, several clips on beech trees on my Barking Up the Right Tree channel. And I have a clip on marcescent beech tree leaves that I did in February of 2020, I believe, that shows that clearly. And we've come about maybe a quarter of the way around this blue loop. And most of what I've been doing is on the blue and white dashed loop, which runs concurrent with the blue loop. And we've got a little arrow here as to our current location. So far, not much climbing, just undulating terrain. But we do have to ascend Lambert Peak, or Lambert Mountain is what it says on the maps that I have, which is about 300 feet higher than the surrounding lowlands, and it's about 530 feet high. So let's go get up in elevation, and we'll see what how the forest might change. As you can see from many of these clips I've done, this was all pasture land at one time. And if the mountain gets too steep, they probably gave up on the pasturing and may have just used the land for a supply of firewood or saw logs, but not necessarily for grazing sheep and cattle. And while ascending Lambert Mountain here, I'm starting to see this, it's called the Preston Gabbro, Gabbro. I believe I misspelled it a few minutes ago. And forming some ledges up here. And again, if you've hiked in this area, the ledges here look a little different than what we're used to seeing. To the east of here and to the south of here, there's a plate boundary just to our north. And to the north of here, up in Windham County, Tolland County, it's mostly sedimentary rocks that got warmed up and recrystallized during plate collisions and mountain forming. They still have that layered appearance. And to the south of here, there are rocks that actually were from a different landmass that was welded to North America back during the, I'll have to check the books, I think it was maybe during the Pennsylvanian or Permian period. And they have a different appearance. They are basically granitic rocks that have been warmed up and recrystallized as well. But this Preston Gabbro looks a lot different than any of them, and it's just neat to look at. It's a different color. It breaks in different chunks, and just has a slightly different feel on this hike here. I'm not sure if this was ever quarried. I know the rocks of similar chemistry in central Connecticut, the basalt layers, B-A-S-A-L-T layers, were quarried extensively and are still quarried extensively. So let's just keep our eyes open as we climb Lambert Mountain here and see what all we can find. And I believe we're nearing the top of Lambert Mountain here. And I'm going to say with some certainty that this reminds me of some of the trap rock ridges that I've hiked in central Connecticut. Partly because the rocks are very similar. And because the rocks are similar, the soil is similar. Because most of the soil you find, even though the glaciers move it around, most of it doesn't get moved very far. So the soil that you find underfoot is usually derived from the rocks nearby. And these rocks that are made of basalt and made of gabbro have more minerals in them that plants can use than some of the other rocks that are common in southern New England. And what I'm finding up here is what I'm going to call a sweet soil. I'm finding a lot of red cedar. If this were a real acid soil, we'd be finding more pitch pine and white pine on this bluff. But it's almost exclusively red cedar, at least on the areas that are exposed and thin soiled, and the places where being evergreen would work to your advantage. There's also a lot of pignut hickory up here. And I'm not seeing a lot of the acid-loving plants like the scarlet oak or the chestnut oak, but we'll be on the lookout for those as the rock units may change as this hike proceeds on. Meanwhile, we're going to be treated to a partial view. Let's pause for just a minute. And we'll just pan around here. They've got several strategically placed benches in this preserve. And in this case, I think we have a partial view to our southwest. And some gold colors. I believe that might be a northern red oak that's turned gold. Some of the bluffs in this area, you can actually see the ocean around Block Island and Westerly, Rhode Island. Not getting a glimpse from right here. We'll see what else comes into view as this hike proceeds on. But this is definitely a habitat If you're finding this much red cedar and no white pine or pitch pine, that would indicate the soil is of higher on the pH scale. It may still be slightly acid. And my understanding is that these volcanic rocks that are gabbro and basalt often do erode into a sweeter soil, and you get a unique plant community because of that. And about a quarter mile below the summit of Lambert Mountain, there's all kinds of ledges back here on the main Blue Trail. There's also a little side loop you can take called the Cliff Crest Trail, where you're above a cliff line, and in this case we're below one. We can really see these gabbro rocks here and how they break. And boy, if I was a porcupine, that'd be a good place to spend some time down in those boulder jumbles during the winter time. And animals that need to stay where there's a constant temperature, black rat snakes and other snakes usually den up in these spots. Got a little bit more right up here. It's about a 40-50 foot ledge here. Trail goes right next to it, so it's easy to study it and enjoy the beauty. And there's plenty of maps and trailblazes at this Tri-Town Forest Preserve. So no trouble finding your way around here. The volunteers have done a great job. And we had a big windstorm blow through yesterday, and they were already out here this morning looking for blowdown to keep this place usable for the public. So we're about halfway through that loop, the blue loop. We're doing it in a clockwise direction. And going to be heading up towards Rickstown Mountain in a few minutes here. They've created several benches for people to rest on and just really soak up what's to be seen and observed here, and just to be at one with nature. And the organization that runs this park has dozens of parcels throughout New London County here. And I believe there may even be some in Washington County, Rhode Island, but this is called the Avalonia Land Trust, and their mission is to preserve all these tracts of land that become available either through purchase or through donation. And we're back on the blue trail after the yellow trail split off. And we're starting to see some different plants. I'd commented on Lambert Mountain I wasn't seeing any chestnut oak up there, and I wasn't. But we've come a little further east, and perhaps the soil is a little different here. The bedrock might be a little different, and we're getting some chestnut oak and some American chestnut sprouts here. This one's maybe 20 feet high. Boy, it sure is pretty. We're getting that partly sunny part, the sunny part of the partly sunny day that was forecast. So the sun picked a great time to come out. Let's look at these chestnut leaves. Chestnut sprouts are not uncommon in this area, but I hadn't seen too many on this hike. I just added chestnut, American chestnut, to my Barking Up the Right Tree channel because I was finding a lot of it in the Arcadia management area just to our east here. Enough that I thought it would be noteworthy to include it on that channel, even though many of the chestnut trees are long gone and have been for years. The survivors are still here, and it was worthy of my recording. So you can look for that on Barking Up the Right Tree. And we do have some American chestnut here, maybe 20 feet high. I don't see evidence of the blight on this tree yet. Let's hope it can hang in there a little bit longer. Meanwhile, just real pretty here. So as the forest changes, so do the colors. The first part of this hike, the sky was gray and the woods were a little gray, but now we're getting some real nice golds and reds. And every mountainside is a little different this time of year. Some hold their colors longer than others, but the color that remains here and this sunlight that's coming through now is giving us quite the show. So let's enjoy the view as we hike here. I believe I'm zooming in on the beautiful maroon color of a flowering dogwood there. And some more red maple. Living up to its name. And one of the landmarks in the park literature on the east side of this preserve, we're a little more than halfway through the blue loop going clockwise. There's a very large chestnut oak in the background there. I'm going to stay on the official trail here. That's their request. This guy's got to be 3 feet around. He's multi-stemmed or multi-branched, which means that tree took root before this was forested. As you've seen from the last clip, there's extensive stone walls through this area demarcating pastures. So this guy took root while this was still in agricultural use, and the branches went in all directions because they could. Trees don't spread out like that if they're in a mature woods or woods that's growing, but if there's sun to be had in all directions, out they will go. So this chestnut oak has been around a while. And on the east side of the preserve, or west side of the preserve, I didn't see any chestnut oak. So every section of trail can have its own unique plants and its own unique feel. And as the leaves on this witch hazel turn gold, the flower buds start to open. I haven't seen any today on this hike that have done that, but I saw some yesterday in a different area that had. So usually right around Halloween is when the witch hazel starts to lose its leaves and get its flowers. The flowers hang around right till around Thanksgiving, even a few days later sometimes. So as the world gets more cold, gray, and colorless in November, the witch hazel adds some color to what can be a kind of a visually unappealing time of year before the snows start to fall and give us that pretty color again. Well, we're about halfway up Rickstown Mountain. There was actually a quarry at the bottom. So this stone can be used for building, and it's a lot like the trap rock in central Connecticut that is mined extensively for, basically for road base. It doesn't quarry into big chunks, but it forms nice even chunks that pack well when you're building things with gravel and larger chunks to create the bed of which the road is built. You can see even in the stone wall here, a lot of these rocks are about the same size and about the same shape. So made it easier on the wall builders as well. And the walls and old pastures continue right to the summit of Rickstown Mountain. And these trails are well designed. It never gets steep for long. There's a couple stone and wooden steps where it did get steep. So these are well-built trails. They don't look like they get tons of people each week, which is just as well for the goal of this preserve, is to provide nesting habitat for birds and all kinds of other plants and animals. So plenty of nice little benches here. Take your break if you need one. And every turn of the trail has a different view. It's never the same for long. This is an interesting place just for that reason alone. The trail never goes straight for long. It ebbs and flows and weaves in and out of these ledges and pastures, and it's a very interesting place to hike. You won't get bored here. I didn't even try all the trails. I'm about 2/3 the way through it now. I'm gonna have to take a lunch break soon and then see what we can find on the final leg. And as we continue along, after passing the summit of Rickstown Mountain, the land undulates. It does drop in elevation a little bit and then undulates. And we're treated to another view here where this green bench is. And yes, there is some more chestnut oak up here. I didn't see a lot of it near the summit of Rickstown Mountain, but this lower area here has lots of it. And this one here, it laid down, but it didn't die. It started sending sprouts up after it was blown over or felled. And away it goes, reaching for the sky. And we do have another partial view here. Actually, this one looks like they've done some intentional clearing to open this up. And I believe we're looking south or southeast here. So this area is very hilly and very wooded, so you don't get a view that goes too far before another hill will block the view. But some of the larger hills around here do have views of the ocean. And after about 4.5 hours on the Blue Trail here, the Tri-Town Forest Preserve, we're going to put the wraps on this adventure here. I got about another half mile to walk, but I'm just going to concentrate on that. So let's take one more look at the beautiful fall colors. This is mostly the red maple we're seeing today that's got the nice colors. The sugar maple is kind of past its peak. And let's take one more look at this Preston Gabbro. These boulders are pretty much scattered throughout this park. This one is fairly large. There's been many more just like it. The stone walls have been scattered throughout this park, but actually I haven't seen too many in the last 20-30 minutes of walking. So obviously some of this land was pastured more intensively than others. And this one's covered in rock cap fern. Anybody that's watched my other videos have heard me comment on rock cap fern before, or rock polypody fern. It doesn't like to grow on rocks. It likes to grow where the deer can't reach it. So it grows on rocks for that reason. But it can grow on the ground, and it does grow on the ground if it's an area where the deer are either not too populous, or there's plenty of other food for them, or it's on the ground where they still can't reach it, like maybe on a steep slope that's just not appealing to them. So if you're interested in geology, this is a unique area. I mean, this is not a type of rock you find in most parts of New England. And I don't believe it's found in too many places in the Appalachians, this type of rock. So there's all kinds of different printed maps and materials that have been published on this area. And I perused some of them and don't really have a lot of it committed to memory. But the geologists have spent generations putting the geological puzzle together for this area. And the puzzle pieces come together just to the east of Rickstown Mountain there. Along Rickstown Road, there's a major fault that separates what was once a landmass that was not part of North America with the North American continent. So to the untrained eye, it just looks like another rock. To me, it looks like a rock that has different colors and texture than the surrounding areas here. But to those that have studied this for generations, there's a much larger and more interesting and complicated story that's been unraveled and told, and it's still being told. So we've come right about to this last wiggle in the Blue Trail, and it's going to flatten out and straighten out as we approach the parking lot on that sharp bend in Miller Road.